Alright, so I watched the Joe Rogan Podcast with Elon Musk just a couple hours ago. And the Joe Rogan Podcast is something I'm a fan of. I love Joe Rogan. I love the guests he has on for the most part. Some of the guests he has on say some things that really make you think, that really, honestly, no sugarcoating it. A lot of the things they talk about, just after hearing them, after listening to what some of these people have to say, they make you feel like you learned something, like you engaged in some sort of deep conversation, like you expanded your knowledge on something, like you, almost like you're better as a person after watching it. And some of these Joe Rogan podcasts are just absolute legendary status. Like you got the ones with Jordan Peterson, Sargon of Akkad, which, I mean, Sargon of Akkad isn't really, I wouldn't really say he's like some legendary figure, but my point is that the conversations had on this podcast, they aren't jokes, they're fucking legit. You got the ones with Dennis McKenna. I mean, I could list them all. I could list all the ones that I like the most, all the ones I would recommend. And I would add to that list this one with Elon Musk. I gotta say, before I watched Joe Rogan's podcast with Elon Musk, I didn't really think very highly of Elon Musk. Honestly, I didn't really know anything about him. All I knew was he was very rich and famous. He had been very successful. He's pretty much a genius. Didn't he send like a car into space? He's the owner of Tesla. He just lives on the edge of human progression. That's pretty much the whole vibe I got before watching the interview. And the interview, or the podcast, the conversation, kind of solidified that for me. And it gave me a ton of respect for Elon Musk. Made me think he's a genuinely good guy, saying things like, there needs to be more love in the world, people aren't as hateful as you think they are, and things like that. That we need a little bit more compassion. He talked about artificial intelligence, how he genuinely thinks that's a dangerous road to go down. Talked about a lot of interesting things. Very interesting conversation. But that's not what this video is about. Towards the end of the 3-hour-long podcast, Elon Musk smoked a weed. Elon Musk smoked a weed. And the reaction was pretty surprising, to be honest. Because it was in California, it was legal, all these things. Elon himself said, well, you know, he's been drinking whiskey and such. He himself said that he didn't feel anything, that he doesn't really smoke weed ever, that he doesn't like it because he thinks it makes him unproductive. He says it's the opposite of coffee, essentially. So he doesn't do it. It's not his thing. But he did it on a podcast. And so today, we're going to talk about an article published by ABC News, written by Paul A. Einstein on September 7th, 2018. Luckily, this article is pretty short. Yesterday's article was absolutely abysmal. It was just, there was no thesis. It was just a terrible article. It wasn't even as though an elementary kid had written it, because an elementary kid would have at least a thesis, I would assume. The article did not. Anyway, that's besides the point. I don't know why I'm talking about it. Tesla stock plummets after Elon Musk smokes weed on live show and 2 execs quit in one day. So, Elon Musk smokes a weed, he does the devil's lettuce, in a legal state, says he didn't really feel any effect. It wasn't even a big toke, really. It was weed and tobacco. He just took a brief puff. And apparently, after having done so, his stock dropped, which is pretty ridiculous. I feel bad for the people who made the naive decision to leave Tesla. A total of 48 executives have reportedly left Tesla this year, and analysts have downgraded the company's stock. Tesla's stock plunged 9% on Friday after a bizarre podcast in which CEO Elon Musk smoked weed and sipped whiskey, and 2 high-profile executives abruptly announced they were leaving the company. How uptight do you have to be to quit your job after your CEO does that? Do they just not want to be associated with that? I mean, it was legal. They were doing it on their own time, during a long-form discussion. I don't understand the problem at all. It's like everything Elon had to say was just thrown out the window in the minds of these people because of the substances they consumed during the podcast. I don't know about you, but this podcast made me deeply respect Elon Musk as a person. I'm really glad he did the podcast. I think he did an excellent job at conveying ideas and showing people he's just a genuine person and not some corporate robot, some weird machine that a lot of people seem to want to make him out to be. Let's continue. Musk has found himself at the center of a lot of buzz in recent months, including some questions about whether he's been using drugs, illegal or illicit, and he may have provided the answer himself during a Thursday night podcast by comedian Joe Rogan. Musk smoked what Rogan described as a joint containing a mix of marijuana and tobacco. Yeah, he did make himself very clear, actually. He says he never does it. And you can clearly see in the interaction, if you watch the video, that he's obviously uncomfortable with it. It's a novelty to him at the same time, though. Clearly, he's not experienced. He's not the type of person who smokes this kind of stuff. You can just tell by his mannerisms, his ideas. You can tell based on all those things. You can tell just on his reaction of it. He even says that he doesn't notice any effects. That's not something an avid smoker would say. The article goes on to say, quote, "I'm not a regular smoker of weed," the Tesla chief executive told Rogan and his podcast listeners. The episode quickly added to the growing controversy over the South African-born executive's behavior in recent months and increased concerns that Musk might be using other drugs. I've never heard these concerns. I think they're unfounded. I think they're baseless rumors. And I think it's silly to suggest that he's doing these drugs if it's not proven, if there's no reason to think so. Elon Musk is a weird dude. He describes his brain as a curse, or at least that's implied in the podcast, and he acknowledges many times he's very different. He even goes out of his way to say that most people make the mistake of saying that they would want to be him, but in reality, they probably don't want to be him. So he's acknowledged that he's definitely a different person, at the very least. In fact, his strangeness is pretty much a center point in many parts of the conversation. And I think it's silly, because I already understand this train of thought. I think it's silly that these people assume he does some drugs or whatever, I assume them to be hard drugs, because of just how he is as a person. I think it's very insulting. I think it implies that you didn't listen to the podcast even a little bit, probably didn't even listen to a single sentence, and it's completely intellectually dishonest. It's actually very insulting. In an emotional August interview with the New York Times last month, the CEO said he was working as many as 120 hours a week, admitting that friends were worried he was facing exhaustion. The Times also quoted sources claiming that some members of the Tesla board were worried about Musk's use of sleeping drug Ambien. And I did a tiny bit of research to, try to find out why they would suggest that he might be abusing Ambien. And I think I found out why. Right here, there is a list of side effects. The following serious adverse reactions are discussed in greater detail in other sections of the labeling. And as you can see here, one of the side effects are abnormal thinking and behavior changes, and complex behaviors. And that seems to be Elon Musk's defining characteristic. So I think I understand where this concern is coming from, but that's not to say I think it's justified. I don't think there's enough information at all. So members of the Tesla board are worried he's abusing Ambien, which is a narcolepsy drug treatment. And in the podcast, Elon Musk does mention coffee and how he said he tends to like it more than weed because it makes him more productive. So I would say it is kind of making sense. It would make sense. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was using Ambien. But does that mean he's abusing it? Could be he was prescribed it. I'm just giving him the benefit of the doubt. And at the end of the day, it's really none of my business. Because I feel like more often than not, these articles like to jump to conclusions, especially mainstream articles. They like to jump to conclusions because they totally lack even a little bit of compassion towards the people they talk about. Anyway, let's move on. Then last month, rap singer Azealia Banks, a friend of the singer Grimes, whom Musk has been dating, claimed in a tweet that she saw Musk high on LSD at the time he tweeted about taking Tesla private. LSD is a weird thing. I would honestly assume LSD is something that a lot of these rich people would have taken at least once. LSD isn't something you get addicted to. It's not something that you take regularly. So I don't know. I wouldn't say what Elon Musk does in his free time is concerning, especially if it's LSD. Honestly, I don't even know if he does LSD. Whether Musk has been using drugs, is suffering from exhaustion, or, in his words, is struggling through an excruciating time of his life, his behavior is raising flags, and also appears to be contributing to the growing loss of talent at the California car maker. So, at this point, article analysis has taught me that no article is unbiased. So far, every single article I've reviewed has been drenched in bias. It's gotten to a point to where it's almost redundant to acknowledge it, because it's assumed that there will be bias in these articles. Clearly, this article's bias is against Elon Musk, implying that, with the quotations around excruciating, that he doesn't have any troubles in life, that his troubles are unjustified because he's rich, because he's successful, and they assume that he must be having the time of his life. And maybe he is, but you can't just assume that. You just can't do it. People are too complicated, and you oversimplifying human behavior, the human experience, and being bold enough to make a statement on Elon Musk's subjective experience is ridiculous. Over the summer, Tesla's head of engineering, Doug Fields, someone Musk once described as one of the world's most talented engineering execs, unexpectedly quit. Another trend in these articles is that they lack a thesis. And whenever you lack a thesis, you get paragraphs like this. Or this isn't even really a paragraph. It's a sentence with its own dedicated section of the page. But you get stuff like this, where whenever they say it, you're like, okay, how does that pertain to anything? Why do I care? Why does this need to be conveyed to me? And then you realize, the reason the thesis is so unclear is because there's an agenda to be pushed. Too many articles are like this, and someone needs to start educating these writers. Now, two other key executives, including Human Resources Gabriel Toledano and Chief Accounting Officer Dave Morton, are out the door. Morton's departure was particularly surprising considering he joined Tesla only a month ago, a day before Musk's infamous tweet suggesting he had funding secured to take the car maker private. So the article is hinting at the fact that maybe there's something wrong with Elon Musk as a person. Maybe he's scaring all these people away with his abuse of drugs, which is ridiculous. Straight up a rumor. High school shit. Though Morton said, "I believe strongly in Tesla," in a regulatory filing released Friday. He also said that, since I joined Tesla on August 6th, the level of public attention placed on the company as well as pace within the company have exceeded my expectations. So you have the company Tesla, and you have the CEO of it, who is hyper-productive. And then you have people leaving who say, well, there's a lot of public attention that can also be perceived in the form of stress, as well as the pace within the company have exceeded my expectations. So what he's saying there is the pace in the company is just way too fast for him. Everything is going and going and going. It never stops, just like Elon Musk's brain, according to his own words. It would make sense that the CEO of a company whose brain is working at a pace that normal humans can't put up with, it would make sense that that is projected onto the company he owns, and that would explain people leaving. At least that would explain this guy leaving. Musk has never been shy about public exposure. Like President Donald Trump, he is fond of expressing himself on Twitter, but much like the president, those tweets haven't always generated the response he apparently expected. Elon Musk is a smart dude. I don't think he cares about what other people think about him. I don't think he's concerned about the responses of the public. But anyway, you compare him to President Trump, which is the equivalent of saying he's literally Hitler. And that just further highlights the bias in this article. Because what does Donald Trump have to do with anything? Of course, you would only mention him if you want to make Elon Musk look unflattering. 2 months ago, Musk got into a flame war with Vernon Unsworth, a British diver who helped rescue a youth soccer team from a flooded Thai cave. The Tesla CEO had offered to send a mini-submarine to assist the rescue, something Unsworth dismissed as a publicity stunt. The dispute quickly escalated, with Musk referring to the driver as pedo guy, slang for a pedophile. Oh really? Dude, how lowly do you have to think of your audience to have to point that out? Unsworth threatened to sue, and Musk subsequently apologized. But in an unexpected turn this week, Musk revived the dispute, this time referring to Unsworth as a child rapist and urging him to sue. Sounds to me like Musk knows something that the rest of us don't. And again, the lack of a thesis statement is more prevalent than ever. They go on to talk about pedophilia, about this controversy that isn't really relevant to the article at all. Basically, after their nonsense, they go on to say that Tesla's stock always goes up and down, that's very volatile, and that the company will likely continue to progress for the better. The final paragraph of the article says, while a sip of whiskey and a hint off a joint may be precisely what some executives need after a tough day at the office, Musk's behavior appears to be making things tougher for himself and for Tesla. And then there's the thesis statement, at the very end of the article. If that was said at the very beginning of the article, then I would know what the writer was talking about. Maybe I'm just a clueless idiot, or maybe this writer has it all wrong. Anyway, mainstream media is awful. Modern journalism is trash. There's a complete lack of compassion, a complete lack of honesty, a complete lack of professionalism, especially in their writing, and a complete lack of respect. So yeah, I give this article a 4 out of 10. It's not very well written, not very well organized, very biased. I'm always going to take points off for being biased. I think a good article should be unbiased. I think it's very assuming. I think it's essentially a hit piece, really. It's really easy to hate on Elon Musk because he's very successful. They implied that Elon Musk having personal struggles isn't justified because of how much money he makes. So yeah, this article is just another molecule of salt in a wave of bad journalism in a vast ocean of potential. And this has been Article Analysis, Episode 14. My name is PsychicSploob. Thank you for watching. Peace out.